So Airbnb has fallen on hard times, which is kind of crazy to think about because when Airbnb first burst onto the scene, it really felt like it was here to stay. I mean, not to get sentimental, but there was a time that whenever I would picture my future, I would always picture myself sitting in a rented Airbnb, wearing a $3,500 Apple Vision Pro headset and strolling through a bustling metaverse. But Airbnb has since plunged into a downward spiral, the Apple Vision Pro massively flopped, and the metaverse has been quietly buried. So now when I picture my future, I'm what? Sitting in my house, spending quality time with my real family in the real world? It's scary stuff. But what sets Airbnb apart from like the slew of other so-called disruptors that were introduced into the marketplace promising to change everything before inevitably flaming out is that for a time, Airbnb did change everything. Like, it actually worked. It literally turned the entire travel industry on its head. And unlike a lot of these other kind of tech flops, Airbnb was a service that like real people actually used all the time. Not to say that real people aren't using the metaverse. In fact, if you're watching this video from the metaverse, just hang in there. I'm sure the rest of us will totally be along shortly. But knowing how successful Airbnb was at first, it kind of begs the question, what happened? What went wrong? Can it be fixed? And probably the most important question, do we even want to fix it? Unpopular opinion, Airbnb has become terrible. The early days of Airbnb, like the early days of the internet, were full of promise. Here was a way for travelers to see the world while meeting hosts and enjoying authentic experiences all on a shoestring. Was meeting hosts ever part of the sell? I thought the whole sell was like you'd get to stay in somebody else's cool house or cool apartment. I didn't know the idea was they'd still be there. Were hosts really just like, book my Airbnb, it has great natural light, a great location, and me. I'll be there. I'll always be there, waiting for you. Please, I'm so lonely. Yet this promise, like the promise of the internet itself, has been corrupted by greed, lack of competition, and poor product management. Yes, Airbnb is to travel what Facebook is to the internet. In a word, terrible. Okay, it feels like this guy kind of has a separate beef going on with Facebook. He's like, Airbnb is just like Facebook. Nobody likes the things I do on there. It's like, yeah, man, I'm pretty sure that's a you problem. But the thing about this unpopular opinion is it's not even really that unpopular, and actually at this point, it's not even really an opinion. Airbnb posts biggest decline in a year on weak travel outlook. Projected increase in nights booked is slowest since 2020. Wow, I wonder what was going on in 2020 that prevented people from booking Airbnbs. Personally, me and my buddies were constantly booking Airbnbs in 2020. I mean, we were booking left and right until everyone else in that particular friend group died of some sickness. I don't really remember the details. But basically, Airbnb is putting up global pandemic numbers, and there's not even a global pandemic going on. Unless you're one of those people I sometimes see on Twitter saying we actually are still in the middle of the same global pandemic, in which case, yeah, sure, whatever, man, you do you. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. Don't chase the housing rally. The Airbnb effect is crumbling. Airbnb revenue collapse. Top 10 cities. Sevierville, Tennessee is the top city? Who's going to Sevierville, Tennessee? And look, there's a lot of other reasons for this decline besides just Airbnb. I mean, like economic downturn, rising mortgage rates, and a bunch of other things I don't understand because I don't have a business degree. Actually, you know what's crazy? Yes, I do. I actually do have a business degree. I literally completely forgot until this moment. But in fairness to me, I got my business degree from like a liberal arts college, and like that barely counts. Getting a business degree from a liberal arts college is like getting a black belt in jujitsu from a Pilates studio. But yeah, I do technically have a business degree, so I guess I don't understand the other factors because I'm just stupid. Okay, it describes Airbnb as a key pillar of the housing market. Is it? Because if it is, I feel like it kind of shouldn't be, seeing as it's not housing anyone. Airbnb slumps as gloomy forecast fans slowdown fears. Airbnb shares tumbled nearly 7% in afternoon trading on Thursday after weak forecasts for the second quarter stoked investor fears about slowing growth at the vacation rental firm and took the shine off a strong quarterly profit beat. They attribute some of the slowdown to the Easter holiday occurring in the first quarter rather than the second. They're blaming the Airbnb slump on Easter falling on a Sunday in a different quarter? Do people really book Airbnbs for Easter? Yeah, me and the fellas are renting an Airbnb in the Florida Keys this weekend. It's got jet skis you can ride on the lake, a ping pong table, and an infinity pool. Oh yeah? What's the occasion? The resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Normalizing leisure travel demand in the US has also been a concern for investors. I love the word normalizing used in that that context. As if there's like currently some societal stigma around leisurely travel, and that's why people don't do it more. Like, it imagines a world where people think you're some kind of sick weirdo freak if you travel for fun. Also, all these investors they speak of are like rich business owners, so they could all literally normalize leisure travel in a second if they just gave their own employees higher wages and more time off. I just imagine them talking to one of their own minimum wage workers like, what could I do to make you travel for leisure more often? Well, you could give me more money and more vacation. Interesting. So you say that I should try giving you less money and less vacation. What? No, that's literally the opposite of what I just said. Wow, you have a clever mind. I see why we hired you, and you're fired. What? Get the fuck out. Okay, the numbers for Airbnb are down across the board, but maybe a clearer indication that they're not doing so hot is that all of their advertising has started to get pretty desperate. Like, check out this ad.
If you're sharing a hotel room with friends, you're also sharing a bathroom and a mirror.
Yeah, everybody knows that if there's one thing friend groups of girls hate to do, it's all go to the bathroom at the same time.
And an outlet and a tiny counter.
I gotta be honest, it seems like the girls were doing fine in the hotel until some sort of massive cyclone reduced the entire building to rubble. Don't really see how that's a specifically hotel problem. That really seems like an act of God.
Get an Airbnb and get more space.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong here, and ladies, sound off in the comments, but I feel like even if like this friend group of girls were like all renting an Airbnb, they would probably still all do their makeup together, right? Like, don't girls like to do that? Like, this Airbnb ad is like, yeah, if you and your girlfriends all rent an Airbnb, you can finally all do your makeup at totally opposite corners of the house so you never interact. It's like, is that really a priority? Again, ladies, sound off in the comments. Please, ladies, sound off in the comments.
Is that my bestie in a taxi? Fresh blowout.
Okay, and again, to be fair, the party bus could also have pulled up in front of the hotel, unless it too was swept away in the cyclone. Okay, this is another Airbnb ad.
If you have a nice place, and your girlfriend has a nice place, and you spend way more time at her place, well then your place is an Airbnb.
I feel like this one is only a feel-good ad because it cut off when it did. Like, the ad ended before it could actually tell the whole story. Like, if the ad kept going and actually told the whole story, it'd be like, if you have a nice place and your girlfriend has a nice place, rent out your place as an Airbnb, and then you can move in with your girlfriend. And then after living with your girlfriend for a few days, you realize that your girlfriend still texts her ex, and when you confront her about it, she's really kind of non-committal and acts like it's no big deal, but it kind of feels like a big deal. And then actually her ex has a nice place too. So she says that her ex is also renting her place on Airbnb. So now your ex moves in and it's the three of you in your girlfriend's apartment. But then when you look on Airbnb, her ex's place isn't even listed. So now you're like, wait a minute. Did her ex have to move in because she listed her place on Airbnb? Or was that just a lie she told to get me to accept it? So then you confront your girlfriend about it and you have a big fight and you break up and you're out on the street because you can't go home because you're renting your home on Airbnb. I mean, that's the real version of that ad. I do understand why they didn't go with it.
If you have a kid and that kid is headed off to college, then you don't just have an empty nest.
Later.
You have an Airbnb.
All right, this ad's saying that, like, when your kid goes off to college, you should immediately turn their childhood bedroom into an Airbnb. I feel like that would literally hurt everyone's feelings. Honestly, I feel like this ad just fundamentally misunderstands how human emotions work. The whole ad is like, are you a mom who just had their child move away and is sad about it? Well, have you considered erasing all trace of that child you missed from your home and then monetizing that hole in your heart?
When you share a hotel room with your kid, you also share a bedtime with your kid. But if you get an Airbnb, you get to pick your own bedtime.
I don't understand why the hotel one is supposed to be bad. That's like a beautiful, cute memory. They're wearing matching pajamas. Like, that's delightful. It's like a delightful, happy family. In the second one, like where they book the Airbnb, they put their kid to bed in a separate room and then they both just kind of stare at the city skyline. Like, I feel like if we could hear what the parents are saying to each other while they look out the window, it'd be like, this isn't working. We both know it. I'm glad Sadie has her own room in this Airbnb so that we can plot our divorce in private. If all these ads have one thing in common, it's a real air of desperation. Like, all the ads are like, don't go to hotels, don't share a bathroom with your friends, don't let your child hold together a loveless marriage. It's like, relax. And honestly, I think the most desperate thing about them is something that I really only noticed when I watched them all back to back. It's that, like, half the ads are telling you to book on Airbnb, and the other half of the ads are telling you to list your house or apartment to be booked on Airbnb. It's like the ads are trying to generate both supply and demand. Like, one ad is telling you need to stay at Airbnbs, and the next ad is saying you actually need to list your house on Airbnb so people can stay there. Again, it's like, if we, the people, are supplying the supply and demand, then what do you do? Is Airbnb just a company that makes ads? But look, we've established that Airbnb is failing, but the big question obviously is why. And there's a lot of different factors here. This article says, hosts have ruined Airbnb with excessive fees, high demands, and bad customer service, travel experts say. I didn't know there was such a thing as travel experts. Is that a thing? You're just a travel expert? Like, when I read the phrase travel expert, I'm picturing like an around the world in 80 days style explorer who's like holding a telescope and leaning out of their steam-powered hot air balloon like, yes, I bet it was the high fees. Airbnb was once a disruptor offering affordable stays, but some say it has lost its charm. I don't know if it's lost its charm. I think it's just that it's become unaffordable. Generally speaking, the most charming thing about a service is that I can afford to use it without being plunged into financial ruin. As the founder of a travel site, Michael Rosenblatt has stayed in hundreds of Airbnbs over the past decade with his partner Maggie. Okay, he stayed in hundreds of Airbnbs with her, but he's still calling her his partner and not his wife? What's taking so long, Michael? Tick, tick. They interview Maggie and she's just like, yep, every Airbnb, I thought it was going to be the one where he would propose, but he just kept saying the fees were too high and that it wasn't charming enough, whatever that means. But Rosenblatt said that after recent trips, they'd both fallen out of love with the platform. Sure, Mike, it's the platform you've fallen out of love with. Hosts aren't even providing toilet paper, trash bags, and coffee anymore. Damn, is there anything hosts do provide? They're like, welcome to Airbnb. You'll have to provide your own bed, walls, and ceilings. I will provide the floor, and I do expect you to keep it clean. Also, like, not giving people trash bags, if you're a host, isn't that worse for you? Like, don't you want people to have, like, cleaning supplies and stuff so that they can keep your place clean? One host previously told Business Insider he was charging $400. Damn, and that's on top of what you're paying to rent the Airbnb. Like, that $400 is just extra. There are almost always over-the-top cleaning requirements for checkout, often including the requirement to take out the trash. Take out the trash with what? There are no trash bags. The company pushed back in a statement to Business Insider saying that the horror stories aren't representative and that bookings are still up. Okay, but the very fact that the company called them horror stories is a pretty big red flag in and of itself. They're like, oh, relax. Most of the people who use our service don't experience a terrifying, gruesome nightmare that haunts them for the rest of their days. Only about 49% of the people who use our service experience that. This is another article about how fees have just truly gotten out of control on Airbnb. This vacation cost will run you higher in Salt Lake City than Tuscany, Dubai, and Milan. Fees at Airbnbs in Salt Lake City are higher than several dozen other tourist destinations and are among the highest as a portion of the overall cost. Alright, right now I'm honestly trying to picture someone who's on the fence between going to Dubai and Salt Lake City, Utah, and the fees are the tiebreaker. Everything else is pretty much the same for them, I guess. Fees make up more than 25% of the overall payment for a 5-night stay on average. Fees are also pretty much just up to the host, I think. So it's like the host can just literally charge you whatever fee they want. And by the way, I think that's after the fact. So it's like it shows one price, you book it, and then after you've already booked it, the host kind of has you and can just throw any fees they want on top of that. Like, you get there, you pay the price, and then the host hits you with the fees, and what are you supposed to do? I mean, like, you're already there. Okay, and this is a graphic showing like the median price and the fees. Also, it's like, I don't like how Airbnb separates them. The fees should just be baked into the price, like conceptually. The price is the fee. Like, the fee is like, well, here's what you have to pay in order to stay here, but it's like, the price is also the fee I have to pay in order to stay there. Like, you're doubling up. It's kind of like a hat on a hat, and both hats are super expensive, so it's like a top hat on a top hat. Picture that. And the top hat on the top hat metaphor is the kind of brilliant shit I learned when I got my business degree. Also, the number one fee is in Detroit, Michigan. I really have no idea who the average Airbnb user is. They're going to Detroit, they're going to Tennessee, they're going to Utah, and they're going to start going to Dubai, but only because it's a bit of a bargain. Some of the stories are absolutely out of this world. Like, this is a TikTok where, in order to avoid a cleaning fee, they were required to take the trash out, and the trash was 6 miles away from the Airbnb. Honestly, I don't understand what they're complaining about. I mean, at least they had trash bags. Back in my day, hosts didn't give you trash bags. We just had to hike 6 miles uphill with loose armfuls of garbage. And look, we could literally be here all day with Airbnb horror stories, but like this one really caught my eye. Just to give the Spark Notes version, like this family's home was destroyed in a hurricane, so they were forced to pay a premium to stay in an Airbnb, which they paid that premium fully up top. Then another storm partially tore down that Airbnb, including knocking down a fencing. They repeatedly reported this to the host, who acted as if they had like no idea what was going on and didn't respond to them, even though the host would send them little instructions, like, oh, you left something on the deck, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, in such a way that revealed that the host was spying on them through hidden cameras. So the host would spy on them to give them instructions, but when they asked the host for help in order to like repair the fences that were blown down, the host ignored them. And tragically, their dog then got out, and because there was no fence, it got into the neighbor's yard and drowned in the pool. And then on top of all that, the host refused to refund them. Imagine being able to say that a hurricane destroyed your family's home and then it got worse. That's Airbnb for you, ladies and gentlemen. And that hidden camera thing I just talked about is disturbing in and of itself, but it's even more disturbing once you realize that that's actually a widespread problem within Airbnb. Airbnb has known some of its hosts have used hidden cameras to secretly spy on guests. I like how they're trying to create distance between themselves and their hosts. It's like if Hilton hotel locations were spying on their guests with hidden cameras, the headline would be, Hilton is spying on guests. But because it's Airbnb, the headline is like, Airbnb is aware that some of its hosts who it really doesn't fuck with like that are doing some weird shit that again has nothing really to do with Airbnb when you really think about it. The company has also fought against regulations that could protect users. Okay, is it even like a secret at this point? It's definitely not a secret if you know about it, and authorities know about it, and you are actively preventing the authorities from doing something about it. At that point, it's less like a secret and more like, oh, I don't know, a plot. If Airbnb knows the hosts are recording guests, and Airbnb is preventing outside regulators from doing anything about it, then it's not just the hosts that are doing it. Airbnb is doing it too. It's like, by preventing anyone from preventing it, you're sanctioning it. And you would think that with all of those horror stories and the drop in revenue and the drop in bookings, Airbnb would be doing whatever it could to attract as many travelers as possible, right? Wrong. The sting of an Airbnb rejection. Hosts explain why they turn down all sorts of travelers. So at this point, Airbnb is literally like, we're gonna spy on you, we're gonna overcharge you, and actually we don't even want you. Get the fuck out. Such a mystery why their business is failing. When a woman in her early 20s requested to book Vicky Borman's one-bedroom heritage-listed cottage in the English village of St. Neots last summer, something didn't feel right. The user had no reviews on her Airbnb profile, so Borman, who has superhost status on the platform, took to social media to investigate. There it was, an advertisement on the woman's Facebook profile for a party in St. Neots. The intention was clear. The party was to take place in Borman's cottage. She declined the request. Half an hour later, Borman received another booking request through Airbnb, this time from an older woman inquiring on behalf of her son. Suspicions raised, Borman checked out her social media profiles too and pieced together that the second requester's son was friends with the would-be party host Borman had previously declined. She declined this booking too. Alright, so this old lady doesn't want people throwing a party in her cottage, right? And that's totally fair, right? You definitely don't have to let people throw a party in your cottage if you don't want them to. But also kind of feels like if that's something you actively don't want to that degree, you're kind of in the wrong business, right? Like you're in the vacation rental business, you're renting your cottage to groups of people who are on vacation. Obviously, when groups of people are on vacation, they're gonna wanna like have fun and celebrate. It's like if they can't do that, what are people supposed to do once they rent your cottage? Do you want them to just like stand outside your cottage and sternly gaze at the gray horizon like it's an episode of Big Little Lies? By the way, I actually haven't seen Big Little Lies, but I just kind of guess that's the sort of thing they're doing based on like promotional images and posters. Ladies, sound off in the comments. Let me know if I'm right. I know there are some Airbnb hosts that literally stalk every guest. Okay, does everyone just know that Airbnb hosts are stalking guests? Because like this person knows it, Airbnb knows it, the authorities know it. It seems like the only people who don't know it are the guests being spied on. Alright, so at this point, it's like guests don't want to stay at Airbnbs anymore. Hosts don't want guests to stay at their Airbnbs anymore. It kind of feels like that's the end, right? Like the whole concept has run its course. But no, Airbnb is not going down without a fight. In fact, they have some pretty cool cards up their sleeves that just might turn the tide.
Now you can vacate like an ogre. Airbnb is offering free weekend stays at, or at least one, at Shrek's Swamp. Booking opens on October 13th. You can do a 1 or 2 night stay up to 3 guests on October 27th through the 29th.
Okay, obviously there's something cool about this, but I also feel like it, once again, kind of misunderstands its target audience. Because, like, people who aren't fans of Shrek obviously don't want to rent Shrek Swamp, because why the fuck would they want to rent a swamp? But then the people who are fans of Shrek, they know that, like, Shrek hates to have people in his swamp. That's, like, one of his main things. It's like the only people who would book this are Farquaad fans. But they didn't stop with Shrek.
If you happen to stay in the Mystery Machine, it inspires you to say things like, yoinks! It's, pretty great parking spot.
Okay, once again, I feel like this kind of misunderstands the appeal of Scooby-Doo. Like, the appeal of Scooby-Doo, it's like, oh, you have a talking dog and, like, a group of friends solving mysteries, and this is like, hey, we all know what you love about Scooby-Doo, sleeping in a van. It's like, I don't even think they slept in a van. Okay, Shaggy probably slept in the van. But once again, Shaggy had the talking dog, so that kind of balances out. You kind of need the talking dog to make sleeping in a van something cool, and worthy of money.
At the last Blockbuster Video in the world, instead of renting videos, customers can now rent the whole store for a night through Airbnb.
Okay, there's something kind of ironic at work here. I mean, Airbnb really seems to be tempting fate with this one. Like, at this point, setting up an Airbnb in an old Blockbuster is like if they set up a Blockbuster in a beeper store. It's just kind of like a Russian nesting doll of failed businesses. And some of these ideas are like such obvious wild misfires that it makes you wonder, like, who's in charge of this thing? And it's like, well, I'll tell you who's in charge of this thing. The CEO of Airbnb, who's been kind of hitting the press circuit hard in an effort to kind of turn around the perception of Airbnb. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky goes all out defending founder mode. Okay, that sounds like something you say right before committing a bunch of white-collar crimes. I can just picture a lawyer standing up like, Your Honor, my client did not embezzle funds in a massive scheme defrauding their customers. He was just going founder mode on them. We rest our case. Founder mode took Silicon Valley by storm after Paul Graham, co-founder of the startup accelerator Y Combinator, coined the term. And you gotta listen to Paul Graham, because like Y Combinator is like one of my favorite companies. I feel like hardly a day goes by where I don't fire up the old Y Combinator. Basically, founder mode says you should get involved in like the nitty gritty of your business. Basically, it's like micromanaging, but like good and cool somehow. And it's like, okay, I can kind of appreciate that, like a CEO who wants to be hands-on, but then whenever there's like a problem with Airbnb, the CEO seems to just be like, don't look at me, that's the host's fault. I didn't do anything, it's the host, blame the hosts, they're weird, not us. It's like they say founder mode, but then whenever something actually goes wrong, they immediately go, what's the opposite of founder? They immediately go loster mode. I should probably cut that part out, but I'm not gonna. But founder mode is just the beginning, which, saying it out loud, it does sound like a threat. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky. New phase of growth will see company launching new businesses each year. So their idea of growth is just launching new businesses? That's not really growing your company, though. That's just like starting new companies. That's like me going like, oh, I am going to grow my relationship with my girlfriend by secretly dating a bunch of other girls behind her back. And by the way, that is the hand motion for cheating on your girlfriend. It's if you're ever out in public and you see just two guys like locking eyes and doing this to each other, they're not weird. They're just cheating on their girlfriend. This is something that in general is crazy to me about like Wall Street culture and like really corporate culture in general, is this idea of like you have to be growing every year or it's not worth it. It's like if I have a company that makes $100 million a year in profit every year, that's good. Like that's just objectively a good thing. But Wall Street would say that because there's no growth year over year, it's a failure and I'm doing something wrong. But of course, I will never have a company that makes $100 million profit a year because I don't even have a business degree. Oh wait, I do. God, I've got to stop doing that. And by the way, if that joke like isn't funny to you, you know who it's really not funny to? The people collecting my student loans. They are not laughing at that shit for even a second. They're like, that's not funny. You do have a business degree and you do have to finish paying us back for it. And I will. And in fairness, Airbnb is trying to address like the crazy cleaning fees. Like Airbnb is slowly killing the cleaning fee as it aims for more transparent pricing. But even that, I'm like, I don't understand why it has to be slowly. It's like they're in charge. Like, couldn't they just like kill it? Couldn't they just get rid of it across the board? Since early last year, when the company started showing guests all-inclusive pricing when booking a property, almost 300,000 listings have removed or lowered cleaning fees. So as soon as they started showing the cleaning fees up front, hundreds of thousands of listings just like got rid of their cleaning fees altogether. So that makes you think like they were never cleaning fees. They were always just like extra fees. Like it was always just a way for hosts to kind of scam their guests out of extra money. Now, nearly 40% of active listings no longer charge cleaning fees. Okay, but like that is another way of saying over 60% of listings do still charge cleaning fees. And look, we've gone over like all the problems that Airbnb is facing right now, but the crazy thing is like they didn't always struggle with these. It's like when Airbnb came out the gate, like it didn't have all these problems. They developed over time. So it really makes you think like, why did these problems develop? And I think like one problem is like Airbnb started as kind of a casual service and over time it became professional. Like the idea originally was like, oh, if you have a house and an empty room, you can rent that room. But then that became so profitable for people, it became like people would like buy houses just so they could rent out every room in the house. So it went from like, oh yeah, an old lady renting out one room in her cottage to a business tycoon buying 40,000 cottages and trying to rent them all out to travelers at the same time. Like Airbnb was kind of always intended to be kind of like a side hustle, and instead it became its own industry. And like articles like this kind of like hit on what I'm talking about. Goodbye 9 to 5. How to become a full-time Airbnb entrepreneur. I'm just gonna point out like goodbye 9 to 5, become a full-time Airbnb entrepreneur. If it's full-time, then it's still 9 to 5. Goodbye spending all your time at your job. You could be spending all your time at a different job. Like it kind of reminds me of like, like when Gary Vee will tell you to like quit your office job and go to garage sales. You know what I mean? I've seen so many videos where Gary Vee's like,
man, you gotta quit your office job. The future isn't in the office, man. You don't need a fucking 9 to 5. What you need to fucking do is quit your job and go to garage sales and buy mugs and Pokemon cards, and then you can be on eBay listing those, sell them online, and then that's your revenue stream.
it's my Gary Vee. Pretty good. Pretty good. And then I've always like done the math on that. It's like, okay, so I need to quit my 9 to 5 so that I can go to garage sales and flip garage sale shit all day. It's like, that would take me more time than a 9 to 5. It's like I have to wake up at 5 a.m. to go to garage sales. I need to stay up till 1 a.m. selling the shit I bought at the garage sale. So yeah, it's not a 9 to 5 anymore. It's a 5 to 1. And look, it's very easy to like blame the hosts and say the hosts suck. But like in a way, the hosts are kind of like victims of this too. Like a lot of them were kind of sold this idea of like, oh, it's easy. It's something to do on the side. And then they just find themselves in these like crushingly stressful positions. Like this is a post on the Airbnb Reddit. Hosts, is Airbnb your full-time job or a side hustle? By the way, just in general, that's how you know our economy is fucked. It's like everyone needs a side hustle in addition to their full-time job. And also, by the way, your side hustle is every bit as hard as your full-time job. And here's another host who's also feeling that stress. They say, as a host, has Airbnb become so saturated with listings that it is no longer worth hosting? And I think this is kind of like a common problem, right? Things start off as kind of a fun thing to do on the side, and they work in that way. They work, but the need for growth on the corporate side means that they transfer that pressure to kind of the people who make up their company, just like people who are trying to do this on the side. Wall Street pressures the CEO, and the CEO pressures the rest of the company, and the rest of the company pressures the hosts, and on it goes until it's not a side hustle for anyone anymore. A kind of similar thing happened with Uber. Like Uber started off as this very like cheap, easy thing, and now it's become this very expensive, hard thing. Like when Uber first launched, like calling an Uber was so easy. It'd be cheap and then be 1 minute away. You know what happens when you call an Uber now? They punch you square in the face. I swear to God, I called an Uber last night. I waited 4 hours. The driver got there, beat the fuck out of me, and then drove away. I still gave him 5 stars though, because I have good politics, but it's like, is this really worth it? I'm debating like, do I have to say I made that up? Like, will Uber sue me? Because I'm kind of like, it might be kind of cool if Uber sues me. All right, well, I did make that up. An Uber driver didn't beat the shit out of me. I'm still trying to figure out who did. Whenever a company fails, it's always easy to gloat, right? Because you're kind of like gloating at the logo. It feels like, haha, take that, corporation. But a lot of times the effects of that failure and the effects of that company's failures over the years echo beyond just like, you know, that company's specific corporate bubble. Like here's a video about how Airbnb, even if it goes away tomorrow, has already kind of irreparably damaged our housing system.
Renee Mejia's hometown of Newburgh, New York, is rapidly getting more expensive. One force helping drive this change is one of Silicon Valley's darlings, a company bringing in record profits while driving up rental and home prices, Airbnb.
And this is kind of crazy because like even if nobody books Airbnb, the mere presence of Airbnb creates a scarcity that raises rents across the board.
This is like the neighborhood I wanted to highlight that they call the Newburgh Renaissance. $15 burgers, like $8 drinks and stuff like that.
Okay, I know I've lived in LA too long because when he said $15 burger and $8 drinks, I was like, hey, that's actually a pretty good deal. Are you telling me that this orange juice doesn't cost $400? Lucky day for me.
My landlord had tried to sell the home a year ago. There were realtors and prospective buyers coming into the house. I'm staring at them and talk about how they're going to turn my home into an Airbnb and displace me and my family.
So basically, they're kicking people out of their homes in order to turn their homes into Airbnb. And like, that wasn't really the sell. Like, the original Airbnb sell was book your stay in someone else's home while they're not there. Now it seems like the sell is book your stay in someone else's home while they're right outside crying on the sidewalk because they were driven out of that home in order to make room for you. That's right. You made us do this. I don't know why people are complaining about being driven out of their houses into the streets. It's like, if you're out on the street with nowhere to stay, why don't you simply book a stay in Shrek Swamp? And this is really just all making me think like, damn, housing in America is just getting fucked from every angle, isn't it? It's like people can't buy because it's too expensive, so they have to rent. But now they can't rent because people are buying up the places they would rent in order to turn them into Airbnbs, and then those Airbnbs aren't being booked to anybody because none of them have any money. So we have corporations like BlackRock buying up all the houses, and then the few people who can afford the houses are buying those houses in order to rent them out as Airbnbs, which no one can book because no one can afford it. So it's like, damn, no one is even living in these houses. Airbnb, a plague in American neighborhoods? I feel like the question mark isn't necessary there. To even think of that phrase means you clearly agree with it. My wife and I use it frequently when traveling abroad, but we are quiet, respectful guests. I will say there's an inherent hypocrisy there. It's like everyone would describe themselves as quiet, respectful guests. It's also interesting that they book their Airbnbs all over the rest of the world. And now I'm kind of noticing like the phrase is like a plague on American neighborhoods. They're like, we thought Airbnb would just let Americans plague other countries' neighborhoods. We didn't know they'd be plaguing ours as well. We didn't know it would go both ways. As the housing affordability crisis deepens, Airbnb and Vrbo face backlash. Okay, I don't even have the energy for Vrbo. All right, I'm not gonna look up Vrbo. I'm just gonna pretend Vrbo isn't even part of it. I'm sure Vrbo is just some like new version of Airbnb, but it like uses AI and it's only for Google executives or something. I know I said earlier irreparable, but that's not really true. Like there are like some things that can be done to repair this damage, and a lot of communities are already doing this by banning short-term rentals. Banning short-term rentals is happening more and more across the country and really around the world. Irvine banned short-term rentals and it's been great. And speaking to our residents, I think they appreciated that ban. I know they appreciated it because they're still residents. The very fact that they're still able to reside there is a direct result of the ban. So yeah, I bet they like it. The mayor's like, in speaking to our residents, I get the sense they really appreciated not being driven from their homes in the night to make room for Vrbo. And look, I'm obviously not making the case that like Airbnb is the sole problem with housing in America. It's definitely not. But Airbnb is definitely a problem with housing, and honestly, it might be the most solvable. And a lot of communities like Irvine have kind of solved it with a ban on short-term rentals. And again, when you talk about banning short-term rentals, it's not like travelers now can't come there because they have nowhere else to go. It's like, no, they still have hotels. And I really feel like that's an important thing to remember. It's like, if you ban short-term rentals, you're not like killing tourism or anything, because like tourists can still come and stay in hotels. But if you drive residents from their actual homes to make room for Airbnb, then like those residents really do have nowhere else to go. And that kind of leads into like this other trend that's happening, is that it is kind of driving people back to hotels. Airbnb's struggles go beyond people spending less. It's losing some travelers to hotels. And by the way, like, I'm just gonna say, I think hotels are awesome. Like, I never liked Airbnbs more than hotels. Sorry, that's my bias. And no, I'm not in the pocket of Big Hotel, all right? But if Big Hotel opened up their pocket, I would dive right in and snuggle like a baby kangaroo. I love to like get into like a shitty Best Western in the middle of nowhere. By the way, I put shitty in quotes for you guys to make you feel comfortable. I don't think they're shitty. I think they're awesome. I love just like to like watch blurry Office reruns on a TV that's like never quite the right angle as it relates to a bed. And I'm not saying Airbnb shouldn't exist. I'm saying there's a version of Airbnb that definitely should exist. And it probably resembles like the original version, where it truly was something that was kind of done on the side to fill a void in society. My real question is like, why does it have to be either or? Why is it that Airbnb either exists as a corporate behemoth driving people from their homes and then spying on the guests that come there, or just not exist exist at all. It's like, why does everything have to be bigger? Why does Airbnb have to exist as just like an ever-growing Borg that consumes everything in its path? Why can't it just be like, oh, an old lady renting her cottage out when she's not using it? Why was it ever that Airbnb either needed to grow big enough to crush hotels, or it needed to just like not exist at all? But hey, you know, ultimately, what do I know? I mean, it's not like I have a business degree. Wait.